Hey, how's it going? So today I'm just gonna make a quick video talking about how far and how strong I think Killua and Gon are going to become in the future. I think to analyze this, the easiest way is just to talk about how strong they are right now, and then kind of extrapolate the data and what they can improve on and stuff like that to kind of gauge how strong are going to become in the future. So we'll start talking about Gon to start up with. So Gon is an enhancer, right? He's very physically strong. He's very agile, as we've seen throughout the anime and the show. He's a hand-to-hand combat specialist. Even at the early stages of the manga and the show, he was able to keep up with Hisoka to a certain extent during the Heavens Battle Arena. And then later on, specifically, he was able to hold his own against Genthru and Knuckle as well. And Knuckle has a lot of fighting experience, as they described in the show, and his fights against Yuppie and everything kind of also backs that up as well. So another thing is that he actually has really good fighting instincts, right? So a really prime example of this, a really good example of this, is when he was fighting against the Owl and Bat Chimera ants. Both the Owl and Bat Chimera ants are very familiar with each other's kits, and they fought together for a long time. So they're able to maximize on their abilities against an enemy, right? But even then, despite that, Gon was still able to, rise to the occasion, rise above, and still be able to find an advantage and actually eventually defeat both of them. Just like I said, because he has really good combat instincts and being able to think of things that he's able to do against an enemy when the time comes, right? Now, we can move on to his Nen ability. So he's an enhancer, so he's able to enhance his body. He has a really fast recovery time. But the biggest thing, obviously, is his Jajangquan, right? So his Jajangquan has 3 different forms. It has the rock, paper, and the scissors. We'll start with the rock first, because that is his bread and butter. Now, the rock is a very powerful punch. He's with focused aura, kind of like Ko, but, taking a step even further, because he has a limitation and a restraint built into it. Right. So when he was fighting with Knuckle for the first time, Knuckle allowed him a free punch, and when Gon charged up the Jajangquan, Knuckle blocked it with Ko against the Jajangquan, and he was still knocked out, to the point where they needed to take care of him at the end of it. Right. And Knuckles' Nen pool is larger than Gon's, so despite that, being able to use all his aura, all the aura throughout his body into Ko to defend against the attack, he was still knocked out. Another good example of how strong the rock actually is that when Moral told Gon to hit him as if he was going to kill him, or hit him as if he was Neferpitu, Gon charged it up and Moral busted out in a cold sweat, thinking that he was actually going to die from the punch itself. Right, so Jajangquan, the rock, is definitely no joke. It is very, very strong, and that's why it's his primary ability. Next, we have the paper ability for the Jajangquan as well. It's an emitter ability that fires out an end projectile. It is much less powerful than the rock is, because 2 things, really. One is that he's not an emitter, so it's not his primary Nen group, but also because he has much less mastery of this, right? The time that we saw him use it was against the battle with Knuckle, but even up until then, just recently, even up until the end of Greed Island, he wasn't able to use it that effectively, as we saw from his training with Bisky, where even at the end when he fought Genthru, he wasn't able to use it to blast something out of his palm with that kind of size or that kind of strength. So I think the ability actually will get stronger as he progresses and he learns more about emitter abilities a little bit further, but right now it's not that strong. However, that said, it does give his Jajangquan more versatility, because until he was able to use that, there were 2 big issues with the Jajangquan. The first thing is, I'll mention this now, is that the charge up time is way too long, right? But being able to use the paper attack and launching the Nen out of his hand actually helps him out in a very big way, because then he's able to charge up his rock immediately afterwards and then hit with the rock while the paper is flying at the enemy as kind of like a pincer attack, like he did with Knuckle. Then last but not least, we have his scissors ability with the Jajangquan. It's a transmuter ability where he's able to turn his aura into a blade extending outwards from his index and his middle finger. And it actually has quite a bit of strength. We've never actually seen him learn it, throughout the training arcs and whatever, but he actually did use it against the Chimera Ant in the cave when he was with Kite and Killua. So he used it, and then he actually was able to slice a Chimera Ant cleanly through his torso in two, which is very impressive because even somebody like Banolinov from the Phantom Troop, when he used his conjuration skill, Battle Cantabile Prologue, he wasn't able to pierce the Chimera Ant's armor. However, that is to say, that's comparing, saying that all the Chimera Ants have the same, roughly the same, armor thickness. Like they're all kind of the same level of thickness, but that's just kind of speculation, right? But nonetheless, it is very impressive that he's able to cut through Chimera Ant at all, because they do have very strong armors, as we've seen. Now, the main issues with Gon, I think, is that, he's very good at physically fighting. He may lack a little bit of battle experience, but now that he's fought so much in the Chimera Ants, I think that's a little bit less of the worry. His biggest issue is that his Jajunkan uses like a ton of aura, right? And he just doesn't have enough. He doesn't have as big of an aura pool as he needs to kind of support spamming Jajunkan as much as he wants to, right? So when you fight against Knuckle, for example, again, he only managed to use about 4 or 5 Jajunkan before he ran out of power, or ran out of Nen entirely, and he collapsed, right? And the issue as well is that all his Jajankans use about the same amount of aura, whereas only the rock is very effective in terms of damage, right? So, like the papers, although it's very, very good at giving him more options, it just doesn't have the same kind of punch that the rock does, right? The same kind of impact that the rock does. So that's something he definitely needs to improve on as well. He just doesn't have as much oomph, right? He doesn't have as much power with the other abilities than his rock. Next, we can move on to Killua. So Killua is physically stronger than Gon, and honestly, he's at least as fast as Gon as well. Physically wise, I think he's stronger than Gon in pretty much every single way. And we can see this when he goes back after the Chimera Ant arc and he opens the testing gates back in the Zoldyck estate, and he was able to open his 5th gate, right? So that's 64 tons that he was able to push open without the use of Nen, at least that we know of, right? He's also has very strong hand-to-hand combat abilities. We've seen him throughout the show. He's able to keep up with Gon, keep up with the opponents. He's also very methodical in the way that he fights. He doesn't have as good of instincts as Gon, I don't believe, but he's able to plan out every single move and kind of abide by that. So he's more of a tactician in midst of the fight, whereas Gon's kind of just a pure fighter in the sense where he's kind of able to think of things on the fly. Now, besides that as well, Killua also has his assassination abilities, right? He was trained as an assassin since a very young age, so that actually plays a really big part in the way that he fights. So one, he has the body modifications. He's able to turn his fingertips as sharp as knives, as we've seen throughout the show. And with that, he's able to compound that with the kill switch, and he's able to do something like the Snake Awakens, where he's able to flail his arms around and cut through like body parts and whatever else, like he did with the one Chimera Ant. And just being able to do that, he was able to cut through the Chimera Ant's arms, which is, Chimera Ants are pretty tough, right? So another thing is that he's resistant to both electricity and poison, as from his training since he was a kid. And he also has the Rhythm Echo, right? So the Rhythm Echo is not a big thing, but it would help him in certain ways. He has used it before, right? So the Rhythm Echo, if you don't know what it is that he's able to walk in a certain pace, and it creates after images behind him. So if he walks into a circle, for example, then he's able to confuse his enemies as if like Naruto with his shadow clones, for example. So the thing that really sets him apart, however, is his usage of his Nen. So he's a transmuter, but the way that he uses his Nen is actually it's just, I believe it's better than the way that Gon uses his Nen. So he's able to transmute his aura into electricity, right? So it's a very, very versatile kit. He's able to do some ridiculous things, such as, stunning his opponent by shocking them, like with his electric palm or like the thunderbolt. But on top of that, he's able to do some stuff that's pretty stupid, like Godspeed and Whirlwind, for example, right? So by transforming his body or his aura into electricity, he's able to push his physical ability to its maximum, right? So just like the Raikage in Naruto, for example. So he's able to move and react at such a high pace. And he's able to do things like Whirlwind, where he's able to put his Nen to instantaneously react to different things. So almost like a set pattern as if a robot would, right? So an automatic response in terms of fighting, so that he can cut his reaction speed and not have to think during a fight, but his body would naturally react to certain attacks. Now, I think the biggest thing that Killua needs to work on really is just his Nen's odd in the sense that he needs to recharge electricity before he's able to use his Nen again. For example, like it's like a battery, right? Where he uses all his power and then he's no longer able to use it for a little while. Like when he was running away with Aluka, for example, where he ran and then he ran out of power and then he had to recharge back at the airport, right? So in that sense, I think maybe in the future he would be able to have like a larger pool of electricity where he's able to kind of hold on to it a little bit more, or he doesn't need to recharge as often. Then that's probably something that he would need to work on. This is an after editing clip, but I also wanted to mention that right now I think in terms of strength, Gon's probably comparable to that of either Shizuku or Nobunaga in the Phantom Troop, and Killua is probably on the level of either between Machi or Finks, somewhere there. Now, in terms of how strong I think they can become, it's easier to measure Gon than it is to Killua. And this is why, right? So Gon, we can kind of gauge how strong he might become through his one transformation when he was fighting Neferpitou. That said, I can't say for certain if that's as strong as he will ever become, at least in terms of physically, or if that's just he became strong enough to beat Neferpitou convincingly, but that's not his peak, if that makes any sense. So it's kind of vague in the way that the manga was described, or it was transcribed. So it said he said he'll use everything, but it's really hard to say for certain if that means that he's pushing himself to the peak of his physical ability, like the strongest he will ever become at that point, or if that was just the strongest as he needed to be able to beat Neferpitou very convincingly. That said, let's assume that even if that is as strong as he will become physically, that's not necessarily how strong he will be, period. What I mean by that statement is that just because he transformed, only himself physically transformed, if that makes sense. Only the quantitative factors transformed. So his Nen pool, how much Nen he actually has, and his physical ability, right? So how strong he was, how fast he was, right? He grew and he matured, right? But that doesn't mean that that's the maximum capability he can become, because you need to take into consideration in that time frame, he's still in his current mind, right? In however long, he said it might have been decades, let's assume 20 years. In 20 years, he'll have a lot more knowledge about Nen, he'll have a lot more mastery of his abilities, and he'll actually probably have newer abilities as well, not just the Jujanken, but other stuff that he would be able to use alongside of it. Even if that's as strong as he will ever physically become, he'll probably still be stronger than that during the time of the transformation, just because he's going to have other stuff that he's able to use after, when he's actually physically that old, not just transforming into that age. For Killua, however, it's kind of a little bit harder to gauge how strong he'll become, because he doesn't have a transformation like Gon did, right? He's said to be the most talented Zoldyck in history, by both his mother and his brother and also his grandfather, so we can kind of use that as a measurement. But because we can kind of assume that he's going to be similar strength to Gon throughout the show and the manga, like kind of somebody like Roronoa Zoro, for example, to that of Luffy, where they're kind of comparative strength, we can kind of assume that in that time frame in the future, Killua would be at least just as strong as Gon. I think at some certain point, Gon will probably overtake Killua in terms of being stronger, because right now Killua is stronger than Gon. I think Gon will become stronger than Killua because at the end of the day, he is the main character of the show. But right now, that's kind of all we can go on. right? We don't have that much more information. We don't really know for certain. For Gon, it's a little bit easier to gauge because we know of his physical ability because of his transformation, but like I said, he might get stronger than that still. But that's all I have for you guys today. Thanks for watching. If you liked the video, make sure to like and subscribe. Drop a comment down below and see on what other things I can speculate on, other videos I can make. I would like some newer ideas. I do want to hear from you guys to see what you guys want to watch, right? So let me know. Thanks for watching.